Let's get some more analysis now on the developments at the White House in Washington. A huge few days it's been, in few months it's been. With me, James Brown, non-resident fellow at the US Study Centre, also the CEO of the Space Industry Association of Australia. James, great to see you as always. What have you made of the early days of the Biden administration, the big focus, not just on COVID, but on climate? I just saw a statement from the Defence Secretary saying that as part of their security assessment, the President wants climate also central to that. It's emerging as a key part of everything he's doing.
Well, it's not a surprise, but it is moving fast, and we are seeing a pretty coordinated effort across all of the Biden administration's cabinet appointees and nominees on the issues that he said he would be strong on: the pandemic, on climate, on resetting trade, and on resetting the US institutions of state. So some of these announcements were expected. I think we knew that President Biden would rescind the permission for the Keystone Pipeline, for example. Some of them weren't. The decision to end any new leasing of federal lands for fossil fuels, I think, has caught some people unexpected. But we are seeing a very strong signal from this administration that they will take as much executive power as possible to achieve what they want to achieve on climate. And they've got the numbers to proceed pretty strongly in the Congress on action as well, but that's going to be a lot more contested given it's going to affect states differently.
And James, of relevance, of course, to Australia and the Morrison government, is the international the forward-leaning approach of not just Joe Biden, but you look at his team, John Kerry, the climate envoy, the new Secretary of State. This is going to be all hands on deck, essentially, when it comes to their international presence. Such a contrast with the predecessor.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions around what sort of role John Kerry is going to play, how he's going to balance his mission with other administration priorities, what that's going to mean for US-China policy as well. I mean, it's going to be difficult for the US to achieve what the new administration wants to achieve on international climate change without China, without cooperating with China, and that's going to mean that perhaps they have to make some concessions in their trade relations and their security relations with China. And that's really where the administration is going to prove its worth, its ability to pursue this ambitious agenda on climate issues without destroying an economy that's in a degree of transition and suffering still from the pandemic. Being able to keep jobs in those key states that will be affected by change to the fossil fuel industry, West Virginia and other states, that will be a real challenge for them.
It will be, and the Trump legacy, it's a complex one, not just for the nation, but the Republican Party. What have you made of what Donald Trump has done since leaving Washington? Are there any early signs as to how he and the Republican Party will move forward beyond his 4 years?
Well, we saw some trial balloons floated by some of the Republican Senate leadership over the last couple of weeks, hoping to sort of wash the Trump legacy out of their hair. But obviously you can see in some of the solidification of the vote around Trump, defending Trump in the current impeachment, some of the test votes that have been taken in the Senate, that's not going to happen as quickly as some Republicans might have liked. Trump still has his foot on the throat of the Republican Party and has the ability to choose what sort of role he wants to play. Now, he hasn't quite firmed that up yet, but clearly there's a lot of Republicans thinking about how they inherit his legacy and how they inherit his support base, and particularly his financial support base.
And it's a risk of this divide continuing to harm them in an electoral sense when you've got establishment, the Republicans, who are not just, as you said, trying to rinse out his presence, but also simply wanting to move on from the whole message of Trumpism. I just wonder how they navigate that.
Well, I think they hope for a quick impeachment vote. They don't move, they don't support it in the Senate. They may support some sort of lesser censure motion that doesn't quite have the same impact as impeachment, but does hold a level of accountability for the former president. and then they move on and they try and think more about how they can maintain and even extend the gains that the Trump Republican Party made in working class and minority groups, and whilst thinking about how they can bring it closer to some of those more establishment Republican traditions and principles. Some people say that, you know, Trump was the only person that could reconcile those two parts of the Republican Party, and now that he's no longer there, the party will fracture. We'll see. You know, I think they'll try and make a way. They'll try and find a way to extend into those new voter groups over the next couple of years.
And finally, on the COVID vaccine rollout, the pandemic central to anything over the everything and anything in terms of US politics the last 12 months also will be quite central to the early months of the Biden administration and its efficacy.
And we're starting to get a lot of detail on just what this rollout involves. The logistics of getting these two different medicines out and how the demand is adjudicated by the CDC and by the US Federal Department of Health, and how different states are competing. But also what's emerging is some of the databases and health systems which are being used to allocate this drug, order it, track it and administer it are pretty antiquated and pretty shambolic, really. There's a lot of inefficiency in how the vaccine is being rolled out. I mean, in one state, for example, 500,000 doses were sent out in the month, and only 150,000 doses were actually administered to citizens of that state. So there's a long way to go, and you know, the production of this vaccine is not a guaranteed thing. There are a whole lot of variables that determine how much of it comes out of the factories each month. So this is a mammoth undertaking. It's another reminder that the US health system leaves a lot to be desired, and that's something that the Democrats have been talking about for a long time. They've now got to deliver on fixing it.
James Brown, a non-resident fellow at the US Studies Centre and CEO of the Space Industry Association of Australia. Thanks as always.